Hello, my name is Michael Driscoll, and in this talk, I'm going to talk to you about the Python GUI frameworks. All right, so here are the top three. I know it looks like four, but there's actually three here. PyQt5, tkinter, and wxPython. PyQt5 and Qt for Python, or PySide, are very similar projects. They have almost the exact same API, but are done by two different companies. That's why I'm not really counting them as separate, even though they are separate. They're so similar that they're almost interchangeable. Tkinter comes with Python. None of these other ones do. You have to install them separately. So the main difference between these libraries is that PyQt5, or Qt in general, draws all their widgets themselves, but they strive to look native. Tkinter draws everything themselves as well, but they don't try to look native except in the TTK sub-library that comes with Tkinter. Those look a little bit more native. And then you have wxPython, which is the only GUI framework that uses native widgets whenever possible for all platforms, which is why I like it probably the best. That, and it just fits my brain the best of any of them so far. All right, the other framework that I want to talk about is the mobile GUI frameworks for Python. There's Kiwi, Toga, and look, PyQt5 shows up again. These libraries support iOS and Android in addition to Windows, Mac, and Linux. Kiwi draws everything themselves, and it looks like a Kiwi app. You can just tell immediately, for the most part, hey, that's probably a Kiwi app. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you want it to look native, don't use Kiwi. But it is probably the most mature of any of them when it comes to creating mobile applications in Python. Toga does try to go native and will use native widgets whenever possible, but it's still kind of alpha in my opinion. You can totally try it out and see how it works. I think they've recently added new support for several new widgets, like in the last 6 months. PyQt5 supposedly supports mobile, but the documentation is not good. So, and I've never really played with PyQt5 because of the licensing restrictions, but definitely check that out because I think they have one of the more robust GUI frameworks out there, so they might be the most promising of the three right now, just because of that, even with the commercial restrictions that they have on that particular library. Okay, there's also simple GUI frameworks like PySimpleGUI, which actually wraps other GUI frameworks like tkinter, wxPython, PyQt5, and Remy, which is a web framework actually. EasyGUI wraps tkinter and tries to make it simpler. Basically, it's for creating dialogues to get with your user, not really to get information from the user. It's not really like a full-fledged GUI toolkit like PySimpleGUI is. And then GUIetta, it kind of copies PySimpleGUI, but it only wraps PyQt5 and makes it easier to use. All right, so let's see, what makes up a GUI? There are basically three major things, in my opinion, that makes up a GUI. You have widgets, which are the buttons and control items on a screen. For example, this is a button in your browser. These are buttons up here. This would be like a text box. And of course, that drops down, so it's kind of a text box / combo box in a way. This would be a screen. This is kind of like a label. These are all labels. And then, of course, you have Geometry Manager. So a Geometry Manager manages the widgets that are in it. So, for example, the way this web page is laid out is using HTML as its Geometry Manager. But when you resize stuff, you can see that the buttons try to wrap and move around. That's what the Geometry Manager does. It helps the widgets move and resize appropriately. If you don't use a Geometry Manager and just put your widgets onto your application at absolute positions, i.e. pixel locations, so I want my button at location 00, which is almost always the top left in applications. When you resize, the buttons won't resize, they all stay in the same spot. So you may even want to disable resizing just because it'll make your GUI behave in an odd manner. Finally, we get to events. So events are what make up the program. There are many different events. So for example, when I'm moving my mouse around, that's a mouse event. If I click on this button, that would be a button event. There are also resize events. So when I resize the window, there are resize events that are fired. you can hook up to any of these events in most GUI frameworks and react to them in different ways. For this presentation, I'm going to focus on wxPython, but if we have time, I will show another demo with a different toolkit. All right, so this one, let's talk about the documentation quick. If you go to their website and then go to the documentation, a lot of people will say that, wxPython's documentation is complicated. Well, every GUI toolkit's documentation is complicated. You have to know how to read it to really be able to use it properly. So what I like about wxPython is it gives you all the pertinent information you need right here. It gives you the event's styles, and also gives you the event button, which is what you care about the most. But the stuff it doesn't tell you is it doesn't really give you all of the methods. These are like the methods that pertain just to the button, but there are actually additional methods that it inherits from all of these other classes. And to see those, you'd have to click on each of these and kind of drill down to see what else it can do. That is a little bit confusing to most people when they first start working with wxPython or PyQt. So I just want to point out that's how that works. You can always use Python's introspection abilities and just like run help on wx.button or whatever widget you're looking at. Or you could do dir, open close parenthesis, around that widget to get a whole list of everything that it can do. And that's kind of what I recommend doing when you're first learning how to use wxPython or Qt or GUI framework in general. The other cool thing about wxPython is it comes with a demo package, but it doesn't come with it when you first install it. So if you go to wxPython.org and go to downloads and scroll down just a little bit, there's an extras package that you need to download, and it's a tarball that contains the demo. I highly recommend getting that. It shows you how to use all the different widgets that wxPython provides in an interactive demo. And you can actually look at the source code, run the source code, change the source, and make it do different things. It's just really cool. All right. So let's do a live demo. It's a lot easier just to write something than it is to just talk about it. So if you see how it works, you'll be like, oh yeah, this is what Mike means. So I'm going to create an image viewer. And the first step is to import wx. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to create the frame. And what I mean by frame is that the frame is what holds all of the other widgets. So let's take this editor. This is WingWare's editor, Python editor. The frame in this case would be this title bar here. It gives you the title of what you're working on, and it has the close, minimize, and maximize buttons on it. And it also has like a status bar here. That kind of makes up your frame. Everything inside of it are other widgets that are contained within it. They're the frame's children, so to speak. All right, so we subclass frame. Whoops. And we go to self, and then we just do super. And we want to do init. Now, frames can have a parent, but since this is going to be the only frame present in this application, we don't need one here. So it is going to be the top level widget in that respect, so that it doesn't get a parent. All right, let's call this image viewer. This is what's going to appear in your title when we run this program. And then we need to show this to the user. So you do self.show. Now we're going to be good people and do if name equals main. And we need to create our application. So wx app creates an application object. You only ever have one of these in a wxPython application. And it is required because it controls your event loop. Okay, then we need to instantiate mainframe. And then you just run the main loop. And now we've just created an application in wxPython. So when you run this, you should see a little frame. Yep. So image viewer, that's the title we just gave it. It's got 3 buttons and then it has no children. All right, so let's add a child. So it's usually recommended to have a panel in your frame. The panel is used to control tabbing. So if you tab between widgets, the panel will enable that ability so it actually works. If you don't have a panel, the tabbing won't work at all. So I always add a panel, even if that's all I add. It always gets a panel. The panel, it will need a parent, so let's go ahead and pass in a parent. Let's see, then we need to do super again. And let's do our init. And this time, we'll just pass in a parent. So since this is a sub widget, it doesn't have a title bar. We don't need to give it a title, so we're not going to do that. Let's see, we want to do image, so we're going to show an image in this. We'll do image equals wx.image. And let's see, what do we want to do here? Let's do 400 by 400. All right. So that's how big our image will be. Now we need to give ourselves an image control. So wxImage just kind of gives wxPython an image object to work with, whereas the image control is what you show to the user. So in this case, we show the user a static bitmap. If I can get it to type. There we go. And its parent will be the panel. So you type in self there. All right. And then we need to say bitmap equals wx.bitmap. And then we give it the image we just created. Cool. Let's get a browse button. So we can load up an image called browse button equals wx button. And we'll give it that button a label. So it has browse. And then of course we need to make the button do something. So to bind it to an event, you just type event.bind and then give it the event you want it to use, event.button in this case. And then you bind it to a function that we haven't created yet. We'll call it onBrowse. All right. I think that's good for now. Do we need anything else? Let's go ahead and add a sizer. So a sizer is a layout of sorts in Python, or wxPython, that lets you, it's the geometry manager I was talking about earlier. So we'll create a box sizer. We want it to be a vertical box sizer because we want the image to be on top and the button to be underneath it. So as you add them, it adds it from top down. So let's do add, we'll do main sizer dot add self.image control. And what I'm doing here is I'm telling it what to do around it. So 0 means don't expand. wx.all means put some number of pixels around the edges of the widget that I'm adding to it. And 5 is the number of pixels border to put onto it. All right, and let's do that again, but we'll add the browse button too. Let's see, so this will be browse. Oops, so it's not self dot, this one's just browse button. And yeah, we'll just go with that for now. Then we need to tell the frame that it has a sizer. We'll do that. And I think that's going to be good enough. Let's make sure that the panel actually gets added. So let's see, image panel, and the parent is the frame, so you just pass it self. Let's see if this looks okay. Save. Okay, so I don't have onBrowse done, so it's not happy about that. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll create an onBrowse function. And this needs to be self, and we'll give it an event, and we'll just do pass. So now when we run it, it should be happy. Our button's not on there though, so we did something wrong there. Question is, why wasn't our button on there? And for that, we have to figure that out. So main sizer.add button, where's the button? So that one's on self, and this one's on self. Strange the button isn't on there. There it is. So it just didn't resize correctly. So we can do something simple to fix that. We can do main sizer.fit, and we'll just force it to fit. So we'll make it fit to parent, and then we'll make it redraw by doing self.layout. So let's rerun that. And that forces it to forces the frame to fit the widgets that it contains. So that's what we're doing there. That actually looks pretty good. So let's actually make this thing work. So first things first, let's make the browse button work. Let's see, just create our wildcard equal to JPG files. Let's see, and we need to do star.jpg. This part I always have to think about because I always seem to do it wrong, but we'll see if we can do it right this time. So we just want to load JPEG files is what I'm trying to tell wxPython, but it's easy to get typos in here. Okay, JPEG, okay, I think that's right. Then we do with file dialog. The file dialog doesn't need a parent. We tell it to choose a file. That will be the title that goes into it. Wildcard equals wildcard. And we need to do something else. I believe it's fd open to get this to work. Okay. And you do as dialog. Okay. Now then we do is modal. If dialog is show modal, that's what I meant, show modal. So this will open up the dialog and on top of it. When you say modal, it means on top and prevent the other application from interacting with it. So if the user hits the OK button, then we'll execute this conditional. So let's see, we want to load the image up if they hit OK, but we don't have a way to load it yet. So let's do that too. Load image. We should probably get the path to pass along to that. So let's do that. Let's do dialog.getPath. All right. So we'll call this image path down here. And then we just need to load it up. So file path, or not file path, image equals our wx image like before. But this time we're going to give it the image path that we just got. And we'll use bitmap type, type any. Okay. And I think what we're going to do, I'm just going to copy and paste in some code I have to help us make sure we get it the right maximum height and width. So let's see. I like to use this code that I found a long time ago, and it basically will take in a max size, and we'll just set the max size here. Just say max size equals 400. That just helps us scale it down appropriately. So all this code does is it takes the max size into consideration to figure out what to make the other the width of the height, depending on what it is. But we didn't set the width and height here yet, so let's do w equals image.getWidth and height equals image.getHeight. And then we just kind of scale it down. So that's the whole point here. So do scale. Make sure that we use an int here, because it doesn't like it if you do floats. New width and new height. All right. Then we can just do self.imageControl. I wonder why that's not auto-completing. Oh, I think I screwed up this thing. This needs to have a self in it. All right. Self.imageControl, there we go. Then we want to set bitmap like we did before. And we use bitmap again in here to our image. And to make it redraw, you do self.refresh. Okay. So now we should have a button that can browse and a way to load it. But I did something wrong here. So let's figure out what's wrong with this code. All right, so we got none, wildcard, to open as dialog. Oh yes, I do have a position. Yep, style equals. Okay. All right, so now we should be able to browse for an image. Let's see. It doesn't like something with my code. So it sees the JPEG files, but it's not letting me select them. So let's go back over here. I'm just going to copy and paste, cheat for this wildcard because I think I typoed something. So let's just copy my old code in here, and we'll fix that. All right, restart. Now hopefully, there we go. So we browse and it scales it down. And now we have an image viewer in wxPython. And you can just browse and choose other images. I have this silly horse I took a while ago, and it'll load it right up. Okay, so now you know how to use wxPython. I thought it would be fun to show you how to do something similar, but with a different GUI toolkit. So this one has 53 lines. Let's see if we can make it shorter by using PySimpleGUI. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up a new tab, and we'll try to create it in PySimpleGUI. Okay, so let's call this image viewer PSG for PySimpleGUI.py. Let's just save that. PSG.py. All right. So for this one, we're going to import a couple of items. We'll import PySimpleGUI as SG, and then we'll open up Pillow. So we need that to load images with, potentially, because PySimpleGUI, by default, when you first install it, it uses tkinter, which doesn't support a lot of image types like JPEG. It only supports GIF and like PPM, I believe. So you need to use Pillow to load other image formats. If you imported PySimpleGUI Wix or WX, you could just use wxPython. You wouldn't even need Pillow in that case. But I'm just going to use the PySimpleGUI one because it's simple, and the code is interchangeable once you've created it anyway. So let's just do that. Let's see. So we need to figure out what our file types are. Let's support JPEGs. We'll see if I can mess this up again. JPG. This one's formatting is a little bit different. You can see it's like a list of tuples. So we could actually put other formats in here. Like if we wanted to do like all files or something, we could do star.star. Close that, and then you just do star.star again outside of that, and we should be ready to go there if I did it right. All right, so PySimpleGUI doesn't use classes the same way that most of the other GUI toolkits do. Instead, it kind of follows a functional programming methodology. So they have what they call layouts, which is a list of lists. So we're just going to create a list, and inside of that, we're going to create another list, and each list that's inside of it will create a horizontal line of widgets. So the top widget will be our image widget, and we need to give it a unique key. So we'll just call it image. And let's see, underneath that, what shall we do? Let's put in some other types of widgets. So let's do like .text. We'll just call it image file. .text is basically a label. We'll create an input. See, size can equal something like 25 by 1. Its key will be file. Oops. I can type. There we go. And we'll get our file browser. File browse, there we go. And we'll set its file types equal to file types. Oops. Okay. And we also need the load button. So let's just do that. Load button, do. Call it load image. I think that's about all the widgets we need, or they call them elements in PySimpleGUI. Not everyone likes to use the term widget, which is their prerogative. So let's go ahead, image viewer, and then, so the window is analogous to the frame in wxPython. So this will create the frame, so to speak, and this will be its title. Layout is all of the widgets that go inside of the window. And then we create our main loop, which is our event loop. So we're going to create while true, and we will do this. Let's go ahead and make this code just a little bit bigger. And I'll scroll up. All right. So we do window.read if event equals load image. So in this case, we're going to check the event loop and look for an event called load image. That event name comes from the button's name. So by default, the buttons in PySimpleGUI, the button labels are its event name, or its key, I mean. So the key should match the event name. Now if I wanted to catch the events that were generated by the input, or the text, this is a text box, if I wanted to get its events, I could enable events by going to enable and setting it to true, and then I would look for the key dash file dash. But I know I'm not doing that here. All right, it's not supposed to have self in it. Okay. So we can do this, file name equals values, and we'll just do file. This will extract the file name from whatever's in our text box and put it into a variable. And then we use OS to check the existence of that file to make sure it's a good file. And if it is, then we're going to load it. So let's do image.open. Image here is, of course, Pillow's image object. We'll load up our file name. And we will scale it down so it's not too big. Thumbnail. So in this case, I'm just going to scale it down to 400 by 400. And the nice thing about Pillow's thumbnail method is that it will keep the aspect ratio correct. So then we just need to convert it into something. We're going to save it to memory before we load it, basically. And the reason I do that is that this allows me to run the same code using using different versions of PySimpleGUI, because PySimpleGUI wraps tkinter, wxPython, and PyQt and Remy. If I import them instead of PySimpleGUI up here, then all this code will work the same way. It'll just have a slightly different import at the top. All right. So let's see, we can do image dash update, and we want the data to equal get value. All right, I think the only other thing I need to do is I forgot to do an event type in here. So if event equals exit or event equals SG when closed, we want it to break out of this loop and end the program. That's what I forgot to do. So then you just do window.close to close it all up. Go away. And now we just need to run our program. So let's just do main here, save, and see if I did everything right. Aha! So we have our image viewer. See if it'll load up my silly horse picture. Hit load image. So here I've done something wrong. So this is supposed to be values. Let's try that again. Try loading up the horse again. And this time I have another typo, so let's change that to equals. We're going to get it here eventually. And you'll see a beautiful horse on here. There we go. So now our little browser works and we can load up images in PySimpleGUI. So there you go, 38 lines of code versus 53. And I'm pretty sure I could have made this shorter if I hadn't added so many widgets to it. But so now, anyway, you've seen two different ways to create an image viewer using PySimpleGUI and wxPython in less than an hour. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.